All right, good morning, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us today. Obviously, behind us we see a cloudy gray skies, but that's not what our summer was filled with. We've all felt the impacts this year of Washington's worsening wildfire seasons. No part of Washington was free from wildfires this year. Whether you were in Spokane looking across the Spokane River and could not see the other side, or whether you were in Hood Canal in the middle of the water, unable to see any shoreline in any direction. Wildfires in Washington State's forests have impacted all of us. Only a few weeks ago, parents were forced still to keep their kids inside during the summer and canceled soccer games and baseball games. At times, Washington State's air quality was the worst in the world. Hot, dry conditions, coupled with diseased and dying forests, are leading to more catastrophic wildfires every single year in Washington State. We've responded to over 1,700 wildfires this year alone, setting 2018 up to be one of the worst wildfires on record. We also saw a record number of wildfires in western Washington. Almost 40% of our fires this year were west of the Cascades. This is clearly not just an eastern Washington issue. This is a western Washington issue. Wildfires in Washington State is an entire state issue. Simply put, we have a forest health crisis here in Washington State. And because of our forest health crisis, we have a wildfire crisis. Our forests are suffering. Our trees are dying due to disease, insect infestation, and drought. And these forests are on federal lands, they're on state lands, they're on tribal lands, and they're on private lands. These weakened and overcrowded forests are creating a ticking time bomb every single year that threatens our people and our communities and our state. We have a responsibility to immediately address our forest health crisis, to set our state up to be able to respond to our wildfires, and to absolutely restore our summers back to every single Washington State resident. That is why I'm here today to announce an ambitious and long-needed investment in Washington State's wildfire fighting force and our forest health. In all, I put forward a $55 million request that transforms our firefighting strategy and ensures that we are getting on top of our unhealthy forests and the crisis they pose for our communities. The vast majority of DNR's firefighting crew is seasonal. We are the largest wildfire fighting force in Washington State, yet a majority of our firefighters are seasonal, which makes it difficult for us to retain exceptional firefighters and move them up to leadership positions. This package invests $12 million to create permanent full-time positions for 30 engine leaders who are currently in seasonal roles. When they're not fighting fires, these men and women, people like Tommy Matsuda with DNR, will plan and carry out projects to restore our forests from active selective thinning to prescribed fires. This will create living wage jobs in economically vulnerable communities and will create a safer, more resilient state. We also need to make sure our firefighters are trained to deal with the increasing complex wildfires we are seeing every single year. This package adds full-time specialized trainers to ensure that our local, state, federal firefighters and community members have the skills they need to suppress fires that burn more intensely and in more populated areas. To support our firefighters on the ground, we are seeking $6 million to add 2 helicopters to our fleet, similar to the one behind you. The 7 helicopters we currently use have been key in our ability to keep 95% of our wildfires this year to less than 10 acres. With these air assets on the ground, quick and easily putting out those fires, we're able to get our hand crews in safely and contain fires at a smaller level and keep them small rather than watching them spread to 70, 80,000 acres in just a matter of few hours. With fires spread all over Washington State, including the ones on our western part, more than 1/3 of them on our west side of our state, Our air assets every single day were spread thin across every corner of Washington. We also have to rapidly accelerate our restoration of central and eastern Washington's ailing forests. We're asking for $17.7 million to continue restoring our forests to health. This investment aligns with my 20-year forest health plan, which calls for us to restore 1.25 million acres in eastern Washington alone over the next 20 years. That's about 70,000 acres a year through mechanical thinning and prescribed burn. I would much rather see our forests put to product and value and protecting our environment than putting it to smoke and fire, which threatens our communities. This is a targeted, thoughtful proposal, one based on stakeholder input and feedback from our local and state and federal firefighters and leaders on the front lines. This proposal is supported by the Wildfire Advisory Committee, a group whose expertise and guidance has been invaluable. We're joined today by two of their members, Gary Burnt, Committee Chair, as well as Dave LaFave, Fire Chief of Cowlitz 2 Fire and Rescue, who you'll hear from later this morning. I want to conclude by acknowledging our local firefighters. Every single day, from early April all the way to present, our firefighters have spent months, days, nights away from their families, inhaling smoke and dealing with some very hot, strenuous, and challenging conditions. They put their lives every single day on the line to make sure our neighbors, our property, our communities, and our natural resource lands are kept safe. We owe them the appropriate equipment, training, and support to make sure that they can be safe out there, and so we can be safe in our communities. Our children are growing up in a Washington without summer. Our businesses are losing as people no longer come to visit some of our most precious and beautiful communities. Our environment is hurting, and it is hurting our economy. Our communities and our taxpayers cannot continue to sustain the losses that our forest health crisis is inflicting on Washington State. That is why I'm urging our legislature to fund this package. Over the last 5 years, the response to the megafires we have seen in Washington State that has threatened our communities has cost our state alone $1 billion. It's time to come together to make upfront investments that keep wildfires small and will ensure that our skies can stay smoke-free. This is a monumental moment for our state and for our leadership to step up and ensure the protection our state and our communities need. We have the chance right now to better protect our communities, our firefighters, and our children. We have the chance right now to reverse the trajectory of drought and disease that have ravaged our once beautiful landscapes. We have a chance right now to leave our children a better state than the one we inherited. I look forward to working with the governor and the legislature to ensure our firefighters and our communities have the resources they need to be safe. Thank you very much for being here. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Representative Larry Springer.
Good morning. So this is a one Washington problem we are trying to solve. I live in Kirkland. We don't have a lot of wildfires in Kirkland, at least not yet. But when you look out over the last few years and we have wildfires that break out on the Olympic Peninsula near the rainforest, that's a wake-up call. And they have been increasing over the last several years. What I am most excited about in terms of this proposal is the part that deals with forest health. 50 years ago, my father and brother and I built a cabin over near Lake Wenatchee. And in 50 years' time, we've had 2 level 2 evacuations. One of them was this year because of the Cougar Creek fire. And it's no surprise that when my wife and I drive across Stevens Pass to go to our cabin, you look up on the hills and you see swaths of brown trees. Those are Roman candles waiting to go off. That's the forest health we're talking about here, and if we can clean up that kind of problem, we mitigate the intensity of future fires. So I have a 94-year-old mother who lives in Kettle Falls on Lake Wenatchee, or on Lake Roosevelt. She couldn't leave her house for 10 days this year. This is personal. Maybe not as personal as it is for the people who lived in Twist or Pateros or places like that, but it's personal in the sense that if we don't get ahead of this, throwing $1 billion at restoration years after we've spent tens of millions putting fires out just doesn't make financial sense. So from a legislative policymaker, budget writer point of view, I would rather spend a few dollars up front than a whole bunch of dollars later on. That's the argument we're going to take to Olympia, and I know we're going to depend on the Wildfire Caucus, and my good colleague Tom Dent, who's going to follow me here, works tirelessly on this. This is the message we're delivering to our colleagues. Let's be smart about this and do this right. So with that, let me introduce Tom Dent from Moses Lake, also known as the guy with the best hat and belt buckle in town. So.
Well, thank you, Larry. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm excited this is happening. I mean, this is my 4th year, ending my 2nd term in the legislature. It's something that I've been involved with since I arrived. Like the first week I arrived here, I've been passionate about this. I have an issue with burning up our natural resources. And when I came to the legislature, I still had that. I had that issue. And although I live in Moses Lake, we don't have trees there. But I knew there was something inherently wrong with these fires we were having. But my career was in aviation. And I've flown these aircraft that can put out these fires and such. And so my focus was, when I first arrived, was that we need to increase our air assets and work on suppression. And that's what I started. And quite by accident, my first term here, the first session here, is we went into a special session. The interesting thing in the legislature, when we have a special session, is all of a sudden we're not busy. People aren't there to see us. So I started sitting around with other legislators, and we started talking about fire suppression and into forest health, and start putting these things together. But what we came up with was, it's a whole package thing. We're looking at the big picture here. We got to look at forest health if we want to stop fires. We still need good fire suppression, initial attack, and then what are we going to do after, when we have a fire? There's restoration efforts, but we also have salvage efforts, and all this is put together. And this is how the Wildfire Caucus began, simply in a special session because some of us were bored. But with Representative Springer's help, which was a great help, we put together a fire report that outlined everything I said. And the reason that we wanted to do that was we wanted to keep it in front of the citizens of the state of Washington that this fire issue is real, and we need to work on it. So we did that, and it's there. So a couple of years later, I'm over in Roslyn on a tour of some forest ground and such, and I meet this young lady who happens to be running for lands commissioner. She comes up and introduces herself to me and said that she had read my fire report. I said, really? I didn't know people were reading it, but I found out they do, And she said, and I want to know more. I see your thoughts. I understand where you're coming from, and I want to know more. She said, we need to talk. When can we talk? And I said, well, it's lunchtime. Let's go talk. Well, 3 hours later, we've really put together and found out we were aligned where we wanted to go. And forest health was such a necessary thing. And you've heard Representative Springer talk about forest health and some of these trees that are Roman candles. When you go out there in the forest, and some of what's burned 50, 60, 100 years ago, and we've got 400, 500, 600 trees per acre, well, the land can't sustain that. And that's unhealthy forest. And it needs to come back to, between 100 and 200 trees per acre that we can support. And then we have healthy trees. And when we have a healthy forest and healthy trees and we have a fire, most of the trees don't die. The fire cleans out the forest and on we go. But when we have overgrown forests, we have catastrophic wildfires. That's what we get. That's when we get the smoke. That's when we have all the issues. But even more than that most people don't see. A catastrophic wildfire, it kills the trees, but it stops the ground from growing. And it might be 4, 5, 6 years before that ground begins to reproduce itself to where it can grow anything, whether blade of grass, a tree, or anything. And so we call that a moonscape. And we have a couple of those over in my district, and it's awful to go see. And so what this is about and what the commissioner wants to do is an excellent idea. We need to move forward. We need to start this, and begin the process of, number one, work on our forest health, and number two, when we do have a fire, let's be ready with as many tools as we can. And pre-positioning is something that she's been doing. It's been working, which means we got our equipment there before we have fires. We have a pretty good idea where the lightning storms are going to be. We can be ready. So when we do get a fire, we can be on it, and that's so important. and it's worked so well. So I have to tell you, I'm going to brag on my lands commissioner a little bit. She's done an excellent job, and I'm just so proud to work with her because we are moving forward, and we're moving into good forest health, good fire suppression efforts, and I do appreciate that. It's an honor to be in this position that I'm in and to work with the quality people that I've been able to work with. And I do want to echo the previous comments that thank you to everybody who fights fires. It's a tough job, it's a dangerous job, and we truly appreciate you putting your life on the line for the rest of the state. Thank you.
Tatsmewi, White Husk Request. My name is Rodney Costin, and I'm the chairman for the Colville Confederated Tribes. And you know, I'm really thankful that Commissioner Franz has invited me here to share a few words with everybody. You know, the Colville Reservation, we have 1.4 million acres on our reservation. And, you know, in our tribe's history, you know, my people, we've lived here since time immemorial. And our native people, we had our own ways of managing our lands, our forests. You know, it's well documented that our people used fire as a management tool to improve forest health, to improve those resources that are important to us. And you know, at one time, when the forest began being managed by the federal government, those traditional ways were stopped. And today, we're living in a very unhealthy forest. You know, I grew up and I live in eastern Washington. And if you drive over there today, you'll see our hillsides just charred from many fires, both, you know, in shrub steppe areas as well as in our forests. Today we have an overcast day here in Olympia, but if you can imagine that this is smoke and you're breathing this in, you know, for about 2 months this summer, the communities on and near the Colville Reservation, that's what it was like for us. You know, early attack is so important in fighting these fires. I live in Cooley Dam, and this year I experienced firsthand, you know, the aerial attack that was assisted with the Washington State Department of Natural Resources in fighting, you know, fires that came right up to Cooley Dam and Elmer City and Grand Coulee, threatening all of our neighborhoods. That fire in some of those instances came just as a matter of feet close to those homes, to our homes. And you know, in 2015, the Colville Reservation experienced the largest catastrophic fire that we've ever had in our history. Over 250,000 acres of our reservation burned, which included much of our commercial forests. And we're still living with those impacts today. It is going to impact our forest economy for years to come. Today, we're living with those impacts because we have mudslides. You know, the water quality has been impacted, the air quality has been impacted. We're reconstructing roads, we're reconstructing bridges. Our cultural resources were impacted. Many homes were lost. And so I hope that, you know, the governor and our state legislature can really think about that. And I invite them to come over to Eastern Washington to experience some of that devastation that's been occurring over there and how much that is impacting our economy, our people, the health of our people. You know, some of those transportation ways are very, you know, critical for us as well to provide those emergency services, for school services, for health care, you know, our communication services. So everything is impacted. And so we pay a price now to do everything that we can to work together to try and prevent those catastrophic fires from occurring in the future. Because if we don't, we're going to pay a much bigger price in our future years to come. So when you think about those impacts, the impacts to our people, the impacts to our fish, to our wildlife, to the habitat, and now all of the restoration work that has to occur, you know, like I said, to rebuild those roads, to rebuild fences, to, you know, people who were displaced from these fires, for our elderly populations, for our disabled populations who are living in smoke. Those are some real changes that many of our communities are dealing with today. A couple of weeks ago, the governor had his annual meeting with tribal leaders in the state of Washington. And this was one of the things that we discussed at that meeting. And we asked the governor to support DNR's proposed budget to look at forest health, to look at providing the equipment and the staff that's going to be necessary. This year, you know, we experienced a record number of fires in the state of Washington. But I also want to commend DNR and Hilary for that early attack and really studying these fires and how we can best manage them and how we can work together. How our local governments, our tribal governments, our federal government, and state government can come together, they can work together to address these issues. You may think of the Colville Reservation as tribal land, but on that reservation we have many communities, both tribal and non-tribal. And so it impacts us all. That fire it does not know no boundaries. And so I just really want to thank Hilary for allowing me to be here. I want to thank the firefighters. You know, when the 2015 fire occurred, my wife and I actually were living here. I worked for DNR for a while. But we wanted to go back, we wanted to see the devastation ourselves. And we've seen just the fire come within feet of just many of the homes across the reservation, especially in Omak. And when I got there, I was told many of those firefighters actually worked 14, 16-hour shifts just to protect those homes. You know, we really need to, I can't express enough words to, you know, for my gratitude for those firefighters and everything that they did in protecting those homes and, you know, our families over there, because, you know, it was really heart-wrenching for me to go over there and to see the charred hills and the black trees, and even today, driving through our reservation, you know, and seeing that we've lost about 20% of our commercial forests. And we are still really heavily dependent on that resource for a tribe. And everything that the needs of our people, and we've lived in we're a natural resources tribe, you know, our people are just really connected still to the landscape and being able to go there for spiritual, for religious, for sustenance. And so, you know, we've lost a lot in that fire, and we're really working hard to rebuild it, and we need to improve that forest health. So I just want to thank you for allowing me to be here to share a few words, and it's my pleasure to introduce Fire Chief Dave LeVay. Thank you.
Good morning. My name's Dave Lefebvre. I'm Fire Chief with Cowlitz 2 Fire and Rescue in Kelso, Washington. And I'm listening to these folks who are all providing important messages and I think wisdom about the situation that we have. So I'm going to try to talk about something just a little bit different. I think they've emphasized some good things. So mainly I want to say this. I could give an impassioned plea about the effects of fire. I could stand here. I've been in the fire service 36 years. My entire career has involved wildfire as much as it has structural firefighting. But I think the facts in this case are more important than the passion. I think the facts are simple. Fire is terrifying. When fire is running across the landscape, it's terrifying. It doesn't matter if it's a single house. It doesn't matter if it's 15,000 acres. Doesn't matter if it's 80,000 acres. It's terrifying. And it takes away a lot of things. It brings things too. It helps when we manage fire and we use it properly. It helps with forest health. It helps with resource management, and it helps us prevent fires. As a member of the Wildland Fire Advisory Committee and on behalf of the Washington Fire Chiefs, we feel strongly that this initiative going forward by the Commissioner is very important for all of those reasons. There isn't one solution to an issue like this. It takes multiple solutions. And my dad, who was one of the most wise men I've ever known, who's no longer with us, I can hear his words right now. He would say, "Son, same decision today, same outcome tomorrow." We need a different decision. And we need something that changes the approach to what we're doing. That's why the Washington Fire Chiefs feel this is important. That's why we stand behind it and we support the Commissioner in this effort. It takes more than one agency. It's cooperation. Some people would say, what's a guy from Kelso, Washington down in the southwest corner know about wildfire? Well, frankly, I fought fire from the Shenandoah National Park to Northern California to the far reaches up against the border with Canada. The problem is not one local problem. The problem and the issues are statewide and they're national. And this effort links us to that cooperative effort. This joins us with other people, other agencies, to actually look for different decisions that create different outcomes. And that is critical. That's a fact. It doesn't take passion. It doesn't take a plea to try to explain that. It is simply a fact. You walk outside in the middle of August and you have difficulty breathing, that's a fact. So I think I just want to reinforce on behalf of the Washington Fire Chiefs, on behalf of the Wildfire Advisory Committee, we support this. We want to see these initiatives move forward, and we want to see a different decision today so there's a different outcome tomorrow. And there is no greater opportunity for a fire chief than to introduce a firefighter to have an opportunity to speak. The firefighter is where the rubber meets the road. The firefighter is the person who's putting their life on the line. And the firefighter is that person we're all depending on. Tommy Matsuda, I'd like to introduce you to these folks.
Good morning. My name is Tommy Matsuda. I am currently a seasonal engine leader with the Department of Natural Resources. I'm based out of the Northeast Region, Arcadia District, which covers all of Spokane County as well as several parts of the surrounding counties. This is my fifth season with the Department of Natural Resources. I started back in 2014, so I was around and saw the crazy fire activity of 14 and the extreme fire activity of 15. Every year, Washington State's on fire. There's no arguing that. This results in the loss of both public and private lands. In my eyes, it doesn't have to do with the number of personnel we have, the amount of training we have, but rather the amount of fuel loading and the overall health of our forests. When it comes to fire, we can't change the weather, topography, but we can affect the fuels. In my district, as well as in many others across the state, there are areas where the amount of fuel available far outreaches what a 4-person engine module can handle in the event of a wildfire. These areas need to be dealt with. My experiences on the fuels reduction crew, as well as assisting the Forest Service with prescribed fire, has given me a better understanding of what a healthy forest should look like. I've seen firsthand what a fire can do in a well-maintained area versus an untouched one. It can be the difference of stopping a slow-moving, low-intensity surface fire for stopping a freight train going 60 that's on fire. I believe making us engine leads full-time can benefit both our personnel as well as our forests. During the off-season, the engine leads can work on fuels reduction and perhaps prescribed fire. Making us full-time would also give us, making us full-time would also give the personnel more opportunities for training. Turnover rates at the engine lead level would drop, meaning we would have better trained, more experienced leads directing our firefighters out on the line. I know many engine leads from my district alone would be more than happy to work year-round helping our forests. To some, it seems like we're asking a lot, but this is just a small step, but it is a step in the right direction. Thank you.